Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. In some ways, I can't blame Abraham and his wife Sarah. After all, God had promised them that they would have a child, and not just a child, but a son. In those days, sons were essential to provide care for you in your old age. But even more importantly, what they thought in those days was that you lived on through your descendants. In their memory, in the legacy you left them, was your only existence after death. Sons were essential for preserving that legacy and passing down your name. The problem was that Abraham and Sarah had no children. You see, when God made that promise to Abraham, Abraham and Sarah were already old. In fact, Abraham was 75 years old, and Sarah was a spry young 65. The Bible goes on to great pains to express that Sarah was well past her childbearing years. For Sarah to conceive and bear a son would certainly take a miracle at that point. So they waited for God to act. And they waited and waited years, and nothing happened. Finally, it was Sarah who decided that perhaps God meant that they should take matters into their own hands to, shall I say, help things along. So Sarah suggested that her maidservant, a woman named Hagar, should go in to Abraham in Sarah's place. Perhaps Hagar will conceive, she thought, and she will bear a child for us that will be ours to give us a future. Perhaps this is the way God meant for us to make this happen. That's how desperate Sarah was to become a mother. Here in these 2 weeks after Mother's Day, we are talking about mothers in the Bible, some good and some bad. Maybe one of the things we should note here is how having children was such a significant role for women in ancient Bible times. In fact, it's fair to say that bearing a child was a woman's purpose in that time. A woman who had no children was unfulfilled and not living up to whom she thought she should be. Other women would make fun of childless women and deride them as less than. In this case, that brings us to Hagar. There's also another hidden question for Abraham and Sarah too, a darker, deeper concern. Perhaps this thing is too hard for God to do. Perhaps God had made a promise God couldn't keep because of Sarah's advanced age. So they put Sarah's plan into action. Abraham and Hagar slept together, and soon enough Hagar turned up pregnant. And that was okay for a while. Eventually, Hagar started thinking that because she could bear a child while Sarah couldn't, she was the better woman. She had fulfilled her purpose in life to bear children, while Sarah had not. Well, for a servant to act in this uppity, haughty way wouldn't do, and eventually Sarah prevailed upon Abraham to drive Hagar and her son away from them. That's when we discover the astounding grace of God. You see, out in the wilderness, Hagar stashed the baby under a bush and then began to languish in the hot sun herself. That's when God came also to Hagar and promised Hagar that he would make a great nation of her son too. It was clear Abraham and Sarah would have their own child, and that child would be the heir of God's full promise. But God had a promise for this lowly servant, outcast woman and her son as well. One point we take from this is that God doesn't forsake the lowly outcasts among us either, and we are called to offer love and care as well. Hagar went back, and she and her son were brought back into Abraham's household. And God's promise to her son also came true. His name was Ishmael, and he grew up to be the father of the Arabic peoples. But the conflict between Sarah and Hagar has lived out between the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael ever since, even until today. That's the kind of thing that happens when we take matters into our own hands. Nevertheless, Hagar stands as a model mother, one who endured for the sake of her child. It couldn't have been easy to return to Sarah's servitude after all this, and yet she trusted God and God's promise for herself and for her child. With Abraham and Sarah, she waited for God to act. Good mothers do that. They put their trust in God. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.